I think we're seeing a lot more folks in Florida who realize there's a lot to offer in cider and who are actively searching it out. And I certainly have very dedicated fans who just come in and are here at Green Bench all the time. Because if you're in, St. Pete, that's the place you go for cider.
Hello, my name is Ria Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world.
Hip, hip, hooray!
Bringing us into this here episode of 398 of Cider Chat, you heard from Brian Wing, who is the co-owner and founder of Green Bench Mead and Cider. That is based in Florida. You heard me right, Florida. The land of orange trees is now serving cider. Now, this is not the first cidery in Florida, but it does kind of stand out because of the type of cider they are making there. You're going to hear all about it on this week's episode because, well, Brian is our featured guest. So do stay tuned for that. And I also want to say, holy smokes, episode 398, that means we are 2 episodes away from number 400. So there's plenty of listening opportunity for you. There's also, well, it's an updated website as of 2023, ciderchat.com. So there's now a search button that you could plug in like a little, keyword such as botanage, which has over the past couple of years become more and more technique that people are using. Thanks to our good friend Ryan Monkman up at Fieldbird Cider up in Prince Edward County. That's in Ontario, Canada. I did a whole series with Ryan Monkman called Ask Ryan. So that's a great one to put in the search button there and to get a whole bunch of detailed information about many different topics all on cider making. We have different episodes on orchard care and apples in general. So whatever your interest is, and if it revolves around cider, I think we have you covered. So do check it all out at ciderchat.com. And while you're there, do look at the little button that says support. There's lots of ways to support this podcast. Certainly, as we're moving into season 9, it's actually the 9th year of Cider Chat, rolling out an episode every single week, which is a big homework assignment. Believe me, it's not easy to do. So it would be really nice to get your support if you find value from this podcast. And lots of different ways to do that. You could become a patron. You could hit the donate button. You could sponsor episodes. And you could also download a flyer. Yes, a flyer that's already formatted, and it can be posted at your tasting rooms. Because I imagine listeners out there are owners and cider makers and have different bulletin boards up. And I'm always hearing like, wow, I just discovered your podcast, which is great. We always want new listeners coming on. And a great way to do that is to put up a little flyer and let people know that you have this educational resource all on cider making. So that is right there at the support button at ciderchat.com. Download it, put it up, and hey, take a picture of it and set it this way, and we'll talk about your tasting room and your cidery, because we do a lot of cross promotion here, and it's a nice way for Cider Chat to support the community of cider makers globally, and also in turn for the global community to support Cider Chat. So again, check it all out at ciderchat.com. In this conversation upcoming with Brian Wing, you're going to hear us talking a little bit about French ciders and the impact they have made on Brian's cider making in terms of what is possible, and primarily French ciders because they are being imported into the U.S. at a greater rate than other regions of the world. And as such, that really can inform American palates and also the makers themselves. He's going to be talking about 2 particular cider makers. One is Domaine Dupont, and the other is Eric Bordelais. Both of those sites we are going to be visiting on the upcoming Totally Cider Tour to France, where we start in Paris, We head out to Normandy and then Brittany and then return back to Paris. I was on that tour with Brian. I lead all the Totally Cider tours, and France is a real touchstone for me because I've been cultivating the relationships there for a while. And I find that there is so much value to go to the land when the trees are in fruit and to be able to taste an apple that has really made a big impact in the U.S. So many different apples in the U.S. are now being traced with the lineage heading back to France. So to taste it there in that terroir and then to know what is possible in your own landscape is just such a win for cider makers. And then to see how a culture who has been steeped in cider making for a long time is taking that on. All that is part of the reason why I like to lead these tours. The other reason is because I get to meet people like Brian Wing and all the other fun-loving folks that come on the tour. They just floor me out the window in the best kind of way. Do know that people who sign up individually, you're not going to be alone. I'm traveling solo, and there's other folks on the tour who travel solo too. It just becomes like one big happy group of folks raising a glass together. And I'll also say that this tour will never be as affordable as it is now. It will only get more expensive. So if you've been putting off going to France and thinking, oh, I'll set up my own tour, I'll go about, you can totally do that. But the amount of time and money it's going to take for you to kind of set that up is going to definitely exceed what the value that you're getting in this tour here. Just think of it. You're in another country, and you're going to have to be setting up reservations for a region that doesn't necessarily have walk-ins at 8 o'clock at night. So you've been driving all day, you're not sure where you're going to end up necessarily, and now you have to find a restaurant. All those details are taken care of for you, which I think is part of the pleasure of going on this tour. And I know that because I've set up all those details just for you, so that when I'm on the tour, I too can relax 100% knowing that we're in good hands. We're going to meet the makers who we really want to see and then some, and also have some special time alone to just take it all in and contemplate how lucky we are to be on a Totally Cider tour. So the reservations are live now. We had some openings. It's just closed. There's only, I think, like 6 spaces now left on the 2024 tour. You can find out all about that and more by going to ciderchat.com and go to the link that says Totally Cider Tours. You'll see the French Cider Tour there and the links to put in your reservations today so that tomorrow you can start dreaming about drinking cider in France.
Walking through the orchards.
Right about now is a good time to grab a glass because we're heading to our featured conversation with Brian Wing, co-owner and founder of Green Bench Mead and Cider, based in St. Petersburg, Florida.
I mean, the first time that we met was in person, was on the French cider tour. Mm-hmm. Isn't that correct?
That's right, yeah.
And so we were in Paris, France, ready to head out to the west coast of France and have a week-long event of tasting cider. And I was like, I remember when you signed up for the tour, and I was like, wow, check out this cidery. And I had heard about something down in Florida, knowing that there's a couple down there. And I'm thinking, wow, like, really? Like St. Petersburg making cider? Okay, I knew, it's a big part of the facility is also brewing beer.
That's right, yeah.
And you also have mead. Mm-hmm. You have like 2 locations. We'll get into all that. But I was just like, kind of like stumped. I'm like, okay, well, I was figuring kind of like modern cider. And just to, Ciderville kind of knows my catch on that is like something that's really turned over really quickly and maybe has different adjuncts or, it's a fruit cider, maybe sweeter than normal. And on the bus, on the coach, you brought something out, and I'm like, holy smoking Joe, this is exquisite.
Thank
so
you.
I'm like so excited now to like share your story with the listeners out there because it shows what capacity we could do now. You've been doing this for a while, but with transportation, with working and how you source something and taking something sourced from a distance, bringing it on site to your location, and making it happen in Florida, in the United States of America, in Florida. We're talking like beautiful coastline, beach scene.
Oh yeah.
Definitely a happening scene. Tropical fish and the whole 9 yards. So let's talk about fermenting in Florida. Let's talk about that and a little bit more about where it's located and what the scene is like there.
Sure. You're right. Green Bench is in St. Pete, Florida, so it's right on the Gulf Coast. We're working where everybody vacations. So if you're not familiar with Florida, St. Petersburg and Tampa are kind of sister cities, the Tampa Bay area, and so St. Pete's kind of on the beach side. And Green Bench has been there since 2013. We opened as the brewery first, and then got the licensing for Mead and Cider in 2015. So we've been producing there for almost 10 years now. Cider-wise, we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary for the whole company this past year. So it's been great and it's been wild. And we've had to solve some really unique challenges being in Florida and being really passionate about the cider that we make there. I mean, I grew up in Michigan, and for whatever reason, didn't start making cider till I moved to Florida. You could throw a rock and hit an apple orchard from my, where I grew up. So I have a lot of fond memories of that, but moved down to Florida about 15, 16 years ago or so, and then kind of got the itch to start doing that. And like I said, it's been an interesting journey, trying to get to where we could make the cider that we really wanted to make from across the country. But I think we've, what I'm really passionate about and we're seeing develop now in the industry is, I think there's going to be a lot of people who are trying to do the same thing we are doing, and that's making cider in non-apple growing regions, where you don't have access to the apples as easily. You don't have people used to orchards around the corner, or that same experience that a lot of us grew up with. And so I think we kind of offer a unique perspective on how that can be done and how we can grow the cider industry, from that angle. Yeah.
We're also talking about an area that is quite warm. A lot of folks get, the snowbirds go down in the winter and leave in the summer because, it can be sweltering.
It can be, yeah. I mean, it can be, depending on how you like the heat, it can be a little miserable. I won't lie. Summers can be tough, but it really is summer is a really ideal time to, you can drink cider all the time, but there's something special about having a can of cider on the beach or the boat, which I'm a huge proponent of. I think it makes a really great summertime drink, super refreshing. So it fits in perfectly. I'm used to that, fall, leaves changing, hay rides, that sort of thing in cider, but I've learned to love it on the beach when it's 100 degrees as well.
You are from Michigan. You are making cider in Florida. Like, how did you get from here to there?
My brother and I have a twin brother, and he and I moved down to Florida at the same time. I think we were both in Michigan State, and it was like February one year, and we just looked at each other and we're like, let's get out of here. It's, I love Michigan, but winter gets old after a while. So we moved down there, and we picked up homebrewing just as a hobby. Got into that. My brother and I started homebrewing beer first, and my brother had all the equipment over at his apartment. And I got to where I wanted to do, when I wasn't over there, I wanted to brew something, make something, but I didn't want to go rebuy a bunch of stuff. It's as simple as that. So then I was looking, I said, what about cider? And mead as well. And, the equipment needs at the homebrew level are quite a bit less. You just really need a bucket or, a carboy and some juice. And so I got into that, and I found that if I had cider in a keg at home, that's what I would drink when I'd go home. I love beer. Still love beer. Brewed beer professionally as well, too. But I let other people do it now and just enjoy it. Cider caught me. And ever since then, in Florida in whatever that was, 2009 or something, right? There was just finding good cider in Florida, forget about it. There was one cider you could get in Florida, and that was DuPont cider from Whole Foods. I could get bottles of his.
And
so, yeah, that's right.
When we visited.
Yeah, so that was a really special visit for me. But yeah, that's what got me hooked, and then brewed, made homebrewed cider, homebrewed beer, did all that stuff at home, and then, like I said, I brewed professionally for a little while I was finishing college, and then that got me kind of hooked up with a couple breweries in Florida that were, down to make cider as well, to add to the portfolio, and so started doing that professionally as well before we opened Green Bench.
What are the challenges of making cider in Florida? Besides that there's no apples out your back door and
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, I mean, I think the big thing is really just kind of sourcing ingredients, I think, first. I think that, once you have good juice or juice at all, right, the process obviously is very much the same, worldwide, depending on how you want to make your cider. I think the real challenge as a cider maker in Florida is dealing with the customers who have either very strong preconceived notions of what cider is because the only thing they're exposed to is maybe a 6-pack on the shelf, or one tap at a bar. And what you can get at that one tap is usually the same sort of cider. So everybody, sort of thinks of cider as too sweet. I don't like cider; it's too sweet. I've had that one. I've had whatever. You take whatever you like, but everybody thinks kind of that's it. It's very one-dimensional. So I think the biggest challenge we face after sourcing ingredients and kind of getting that down is how do we educate the people that step in the door, or at least get them to give us a chance to expose them to a couple things and show them how varied and nuanced it can be. That I think is, and Green Bench has always been built around education. When we opened the brewery, even the beers we were making were not something you'd find in Florida, and so that was a huge part of the business. Still is a big focus, is educating the people that come in to show them the wide variety of those beverages that we can offer.
Sourcing it. What are the connections there?
It's funny because when we were first starting out looking for this back in when we started looking in 2014. You don't just jump on Google and type cider apples and find a lot of hits. There's a lot of orchards and farms that don't really have a web page.
They might have apples, but it's now you're going old school, like an encyclopedia.
Thing, right? Yeah, and so I was fortunate enough to attend CiderCon back in. This was quite a while ago. I want to say because we started making cider with whatever we could get. What we could get was just basically like sort of like mass-produced or blended juices that you'd see in like Treetop or Musselman's or that sort of stuff. And we made fine cider. We still do make fine cider with those juices. But we were always on the hunt for something special cider apples. And was at CiderCon in Chicago and attended a Angry Orchard and Easy Orchard cider dinner. Which was great. Huge fan of Ryan and Kevin. And sat down next to a gentleman who was an old childhood friend of Ryan Burke's, and his name was Jake Langater. And we got to talking, and I said, I'm in Florida, and I'm looking for apples. And he says, I'm in New York. I have apples to sell.
Yeah.
And thus was born a partnership that we've had ever since then. And so I source the vast majority of my heritage fruit from Jake and his family up in Williamson, New York. And then after that, it just became, the business of pressing. He presses for me, tosses on a reefer truck, and I get it a day or two later. And of course, that's an expensive proposition in this day and age.
Yeah,
but if you want to make cider the way we make it in Florida, that's your option, really, is to truck it down. And so it's worked out well. We've developed a good system for how that works, and I usually go up and visit him at least once a year. Stop by the orchard, the farm. And we talk about apples that are coming up that season, what he thinks he's going to have, and then we start working on kind of like what varietals or blends or things like that I'd like him to press and ship down to me.
We're sitting at this table, and Brian has 3 750 ml glass bottles out of just a beautiful array of colors, too, in each bottle. We got like a little bit of like a rosé there, right, from red-fleshed apples.
That's right.
And, I'm kind of curious, when you thought, I'm going to make cider in Florida, was it always going to be this type of format, or did you start out thinking, can we pass it over?
I don't have them with me here today. We had some of the share, but we'll do both formats between 750 ml bottles and cans. I'll do 12-ounce cans and 16-ounce cans at the cidery. So we like mixing up those formats. Obviously, we talked about it before. I'm a huge beach and boat kind of guy, and it's sacrilege to take glass on a boat, at least on my boat, let me tell you right now, right? So cans are a must-have in Florida for that sort of those activities, and so we do both of those. The 12-ounce cans a lot of times are what I'll call, I don't want to call them the more approachable ciders because I never really like that format, but maybe the more sort of mass-market ciders that we make that are a little more straightforward, maybe some fruited, things like that I have more mass appeal. go in the 12-ounce cans a lot because we'll sell 6-packs of that. I do a ton of single varietal and heritage fruit in 16-ounce cans and 4-packs, which are just, I think, just the best format. I love taking a tall boy.
You had cans, and that's what we were trying.
That's right. We had some out in France. That's right. So we'll do some of those tall boys out there, which I love. Those are usually very limited in series. We'll do, 30, 40, 50 cases, something like that. So not a lot at a time. And then of course you have the 750 ml bottles, which make up sort of all of our flagship stuff goes in the 750 ml bottles. I think it's a format that our customer base has learned to understand. Sort of connotates a quality, a price point, a reason for discussion, all the sorts of things that we like to kind of generate at Green Bench when you walk in, because I think customers are used to seeing that bottle and understanding it's going to be more expensive. There's a reason for it, and if it's a cider, they may go, "Why is it more expensive?" And then we can sit down and talk about it, versus the canned stuff. But we enjoy all the formats.
I mean, that's kind of incredible, maybe folks listening, because 750 ml bottles, it can be a tough sell on the shelves if it's distributed out. So we're going to get back to a little bit the styles, but I'm curious. You were talking about your customer base. Like, who is that customer base? What is the demographics of them?
Well, so we, when we first started, we were very much capturing the beer crowd, and I mean like a real hardcore craft beer crowd, because again, like I mentioned, Green Bench, when we started out, we were making a lot of saisons, wild ales, foeder fermented stuff, things that, we the first foeder, that's hard to say, first foeder in Florida. There's a tongue twister. The first one in Florida.
Let's just explain what that is.
Yeah, foeder's just, it's sort of just a giant oak barrel. It's a large oak fermentation vessel that's widely used in brewing. Actually, I was surprised how many foeders were out there in France when we were out there too. But we used it for a lot of the saisons and again some of the wild ales and things like that. And our foeders, not to get off on a tangent, but it's a really fun fermentation device because you don't clean it in between each run. That's not the idea because it's oak, obviously. So we've got yeast strains that have been in there for 70, 80 generations and have transformed into really interesting things and really come up to be like, they sort of create like the flavor profile of what I think of as Green Bench. So we were attracting some of the more esoteric craft beer fans at first, but it was an uphill battle again because Florida was as much a beer wasteland as it was a cider wasteland back then.
That's true, yeah.
And if you didn't want Anheuser-Busch products, then you were out of luck in a lot of places down there. And so we really liked hooking those people that were curious and interested and willing to try. And then once we get a glass in front of you, we can get you hooked on something, that's for sure. And so we captured a lot of the beer folks that came in, and a lot of those guys and gals were, I don't like cider. I'll take a beer, thanks, no cider. And we said, just have a taste. Let's have a taste and talk for a second. And capture those. I'd love to say it's a younger crowd, but I mean it's Florida, it's St. Petersburg. People used to call it God's waiting room.
Still?
Yeah, I think the average age in St. Pete's dropped significantly. We're getting a ton of new people moving in, so I think that maybe that's shifted, but it still, can be an older crowd. But Green Bench really enjoys a really wide variety of customers that come in.
Are they transient customers, meaning that they're seasonal?
Some yes, some no. We certainly, we're in the season now. Like if you go down there now, you can feel that we're in the middle of the season,
sure,
right?
Like
but
college is in.
Yeah, and the snowbirds are down, like you mentioned, right? And so we have seasonality. There are certainly slow times, but we've developed, I think, a place that's really special in St. Petersburg. That's sort of a hub for the community, and I don't think I'm blowing smoke when I say that. And so we have a place where it's really, there's so much going on, so many things we do at the brewery and the cidery that, for events and community things. It's just, there's always something happening there. And so we're kind of the center of our neighborhood. And so we enjoy like a really steady local customer base as well there, which is great.
Yeah. What has changed since you opened for your customer base? Have you seen any changes? And like the classic thing is, I'm still explaining what cider is, right? I'm sure you're still doing that. But are you seeing any kind of shift? And on two levels here. One is the knowledge base of what cider is, and also on the palate change.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly, we're still finding people that need that explanation, right, about what cider is, but not like it used to be. I think we're seeing a lot more folks in Florida who realize there's a lot to offer in cider and who are actively searching it out. And I certainly have very dedicated fans who just come in and are here at Green Bench all the time, because if you're in, St. Pete, that's the place you go for cider. And we're not just about pouring what we have there at Green Bench. I love bringing in other, cider makers from around the world and showcasing everything they do. We do the same with beer and mead. Is if you come in, we've got a great bottle selection for you to try. So it's again, if education's our goal, then it's a never-ending goal. You never actually finish the job, but we're definitely seeing impact there in terms of how educated folks are. And just what they're expecting in terms of flavors and just the experience that cider can bring.
It's a good reminder that there's an evolution here in this industry, and for both the producers and the customers. And that's part, maybe if everybody knew everything about it, they'd be like looking for something other than cider.
Everybody's always looking for the next big thing.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about cider is there's so much still for a lot of people to experience there that it's going to be a while before they get tired of what they can get.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have like 16,000 different apple varieties
right,
we haven't even touched.
Talk about never-ending. You know.
So, let's stay on that note there. Do folks come in saying what's new? Because I know what the brewing industry has had to deal with for many years. I'm sure you see that. And it's like the demand, got to rotate out those taps. Do you see that happening a lot with your cider?
I would say it's less than what we see with craft beer. You're absolutely right. You've hit on something with craft beer you're always driving to kind of what the next fad. I don't want to call it a fad, but it really, sometimes they are. What's the next hot style or whatever that's going to come out that people are interested in? I think one of the things that I enjoy most about cider is that I can take the same apples from a different year, and I've got a different product. I can take the same apple from the same year from across the street, and I've got a different product. And so I think one of the things we're educating people on and having success is understanding that just like you would expect with the wine, from year to year, it can change, or from producer to producer, it can change. And so I think it's less about what style's new or that sort of thing, and more just kind of about what changes have happened since last year. What's different about the last time I had this, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
And I think that's one of the most fun things about cider is that you have that, and it also releases me as a producer from having to be super consistent with every batch. Beer, there's the expectation, and you never get exactly the same every time. Some guys do, but the big guys do, but there's an expectation that when I have that Pilsner, it's going to be like the last time I had that Pilsner.
Right.
Nobody that steps in looking for our ciders is thinking that it's going to be exactly the same. It's such a great release for a producer, and it makes a more interesting story that I can never really recreate that thing you had last time. I can come close, but I'm never going to hit, which is also, I've had really great successes that I'm like, man, it's too bad this is the last bottle I'll ever drink of this, because I'll never hit that again.
Exactly. But, I mean, true farm to table type of product.
Yeah.
And we see that with beer also, and certainly people sometimes source within a 100-mile radius their ingredients for beer, but you could be bringing in hops from, New Zealand or something, wherever. And you could do that actually with, apples if you wanted to. But I think that there's something about that vintage, right? That we can't yet put on the labels, right? As industry.
Yeah, I think, and there's some, the beer makers, as a person who's tightly involved in that as well, there's still that variability with agricultural products. But I would say it's less. I would say it was maybe less so than we have with. I have one ingredient.
Right.
It's an apple. And so, hops can vary quite a bit from year to year. But my grain's usually pretty darn close. They change a little bit, but I've got one ingredient, and so that it's going to have that variability there. It's really exciting.
Let's talk a little bit about what visitors to the tasting room can expect, because you have two locations.
That was sort of. So I have two tasting rooms. They're next door to each other. So. Okay. So we opened the main brewery and have a nice big open beer garden next to it. And so that's where you'll find, even on the beer side, we've kind of got it split up. Well, let me describe the location first. So main tasting room is on one side, beautiful open beer garden because it's Florida and we got to be outside. And then the building next door to us, we had as a warehouse for a while, and then we converted that into the cellar. And the Webb City Cellar, which is a reference to an old department store, a lot of St. Pete history wrapped up into Green Bench and all of our names and everything. But the cellar is where we do all the barrel aging. There's a couple hundred barrels. The whole facility is temp controlled for barrel aging. That's where my production facility is at. And then we do a lot of the mixed culture fermentation for beer and things like that. So you've got sort of a complex, or a campus that we have for Green Bench there. And in the main tasting room, you'll see a huge variety of beer and cider there, and mead. But a lot of that's going to be, we're going to have your IPAs and your Pilsners and some of my core ciders that I would call, again, some maybe more mass market appeal stuff, because the main tasting room is sort of like, what you envision a brewery tasting room is like. It can get loud and people are having a good time and it's a great spot to drink a beer, and maybe once in a while there's a game on or something like that, but if you want a quieter experience that's a little more contemplative, you come over to Webb City Cellar, and that's where the vast majority of my heritage ciders are. That's where all of our mixed culture and some real funky beers and wines and things like that are over there, and that's a much quieter 21 and up area where you can sit, and the job of the bartenders there is really to have conversations. That's where you go to sit, pop a bottle open, think about it, talk about it, and have just I don't want to call it more refined experience, but it is, you step in there and there's soft seating and the lighting's low, and that's the place you go to try some of the heritage stuff. Yeah, because we need to be able, some of the products we sell, we have to be able to have a conversation with you so you understand it, and then you can appreciate it even more. And then so that's you get kind of both sides of that at the same location there in St. Pete.
Can people get like flights?
Absolutely, of course, yeah, we still do all that stuff.
Do you have a flagship cider?
I do, yeah. So the Mealis is what I'd call the flagship cider. And the reason is because when I'm bringing juice in every year, that's the first one I'm thinking about how I'm going to blend that, what that's going to be. So I'll bring in, maybe I'll bring in 3,000 gallons of juice at a time from Jake, and I'll have a tote of bitter sweets or bitter sharps or some aromatics or some single varietals. And the first thing I think about is, let's build the Mealis out. With all the tools I have in front of me, what do I want that flavor profile to be like? And usually it's pretty heavy on bitter sharps and bitter sweets because I really want tannin. Tannin's what we're always chasing for the juice that I get. So I'll bring that in and I'll build that cider out, fill up a tank, and then I might have a few other brands that I'm thinking of at that moment that I'll then blend and fill tanks with, and then I'm just left with whatever that I get to play with all the leftovers. So that Mealis is like the first thing I think of when the juice comes in the door. So that's why I call it the flagship, maybe. And maybe what I would call the most balanced and sophisticated of the blends. And then the other things I make are, I could go off the wall and do stuff that's fun and, somebody might say way out of balance, and I'll probably sample you on one of those here today. Yeah. But the Mealis would be the flagship.
Nice. I think that this is probably a good point to
it's a good time to have a taste, huh?
Yeah, let's have a little taste.
I think so,
here.
yeah.
Have one. Ooh, nice. Look at that. That's nice light straw color.
Yes.
Beautiful in our very fancy paper cups here.
The Portland paper cups,
but, I'm sure that this cider is going to tast good in anything.
Yeah, it'll be great. Yeah, there you go.
Tell me what we just poured here, Brian.
So this is the Chacon. This is the first vintage of this brand. And this was sort of a happy accident I mentioned before when I'm doing the blendings, I'll get done with that round and I might have some leftovers from a couple different totes. And then I start kind of just saying what sounds interesting. And so this one was one where I always have Wixen, love Wixen, and had extra leftover. And some Wixen and then Harrison and Yates.
Harrison and Yates. Yep. I love Harrison and Yates.
Yeah.
They are like, they dance in the bottle.
I got turned on to that by Tristan at Lost
nice.
Boy,
yeah.
the Harrison when he had one of those bottles. I made this blend and it's 50% Wixen. It's just like that's a huge proportion of the juice. I really love these super vibrant acidity. Sometimes I get with this one here. I get a little tropical fruit, a little peach, maybe some black pepper too.
A little bit of like grapefruit, definitely kind of popping out. But this is really feeling super balanced with the acid. It's not pushing me
Not
away.
blowing you away. Yeah.
Not at all. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
The cannon.
Yeah, it turned out really nicely, and is a really nice bright cider to showcase a couple varieties that I really like.
Dances on your tongue. You know, top, underneath the tongue, which is kind of like that's the acid going on there, but it's dancing on the tongue.
Yeah, not stomping on it, right?
Yeah, not stomping it, and I thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, this one turned out really nicely. So this was from the 2022 juice. And so I had just labeled and bottled that, I don't know, maybe a month ago or so. And so that's usually my turnaround time. Yes, that's right. Yep, sparkling. Now that one's artificially carbonated. I mean, it's forced carbonated, right? But yeah,
bubbles.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'll do bottle condition stuff as well, but this particular run, I love the clarity. It's beautiful in the bottle, gorgeous, crystal clear, and turned out really nice.
Full mouth feel, just one that you could kind of meditate on for a while and have with some food.
Yeah,
be perfect with what kind of food? Would you serve?
I mean,
this with?
Florida, I want oysters. I want oysters. I want ceviche. I want I love oysters and cider. And so that's what, with this sort of thing, especially with the acid, with it as bright as it is, oysters is the first thing I think of.
Perfect.
Give this to me with a plate of oysters for a little appetizer.
Do you guys serve that at the
oysters?
Yeah.
No, so we don't have food at Green Bench, but we do all sorts of events and have food. Well, I mean, there's food all around the block for us. But one of the recurring events we had at Webb's is a guy does a pop-up oyster deal, and I mean amazing oysters. And he'll set up in the cellar, and you'll go and you'll order like a flight of oysters, and with it comes a particular cider that we pair it with, and so you can sit there and eat in the cellar. Yeah, it's great. It's
that just blows people out of their seat when they taste a little bit of cider and something like oysters. It's just like otherworldly.
I think it's one of my my next missions is getting these bottles in more fine dining restaurants around us, because I just don't think there's a better beverage to pair with food than cider. I love wine and I love beer, of course I do. But man, like you give me a cheese and charcuterie with the right cider or perry or oysters and the chacon. I mean, I'm in heaven. Yeah.
Yeah, you sure are. This is lovely.
Thank you.
And it's from Florida. I just kind of keep on saying that because it's like I have to wrap my head around it. I'm used to like seeing the orchard out there, but it gives me such hope that a product, the raw materials, so to speak, can be shipped down to a spot, and you could make it like really such an exquisite, I mean, fine dining here type of drink.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's, and I mentioned it before. I think it's one of the horizons for cider as an industry is that how do we continue to grow the industry, because a lot of that growth is going to happen in areas where people don't have that sort of association with orchards and apples in their backyard. I think one of the growth areas for the industry is just going to be folks in what I'll call urban cideries, if I can call it that.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know if that's the term we're going to use, right? But
we see that.
Yeah, that urban cidery, or just folks that are outside.
You're an urban cidery.
I am. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, what else would you call it?
I don't know. I guess that's what I'd call it.
Sunny California.
Yeah. So it's funny because the other owners at Green Bench are St. Pete natives or spent most of their lives there, and
Should we give them a shout out?
Yeah, sure. So Chris Johnson and Nathan Stone Cipher are here with me at CiderCon, so you'll probably see them around. They were pouring since I got my flight was delayed yesterday, and then Steve Duffy. So those are my other three amigos, and they're all from St. Pete and or born and raised or spent most of their life there, and so it's always interesting talking, because Chris and I have had a lot of conversations around. He doesn't have any concept of that hayride, fall, cider, cider mills, cinnamon donut, sort of like that experience. So it's always interesting to hear his perspective and how we can bring that down to people in Florida, because that's, I think, what cider is going to have to do in a lot of parts of the country.
Is bring the culture to the urban setting. Yeah,
if that's what, and you don't
Which
have
is
to have.
Wonderful.
Yeah, you don't have to have the culture with the cider, but if you're going to do that, it's an interesting experience to try to, like, you've got to educate people on more than just, cider. You got to kind of educate on like that whole sort of experience. Yeah.
And plus you're having a lot of your customer base who are probably coming from the north and have that, so it's relatable.
Yeah.
You know, although I don't know, like a little motif of like the beach side. You go to the beach where you are, and you expect to see seashells, and you know, paddles up on the board and surfboards and whatnot. But I think it kind of warms everybody's heart when you have a little bit of that cultural piece.
Yeah, and if you come down to Green Bench right now, and everybody's running around in winter hats and coats because it dropped below 50.
Oh gosh,
and
that's so
yeah,
cold.
I mean it's terrible. And we have hot mulled cider, available.
Very cool.
At the cidery there.
And that's NA, right? Not
That's correct. No. That is alcoholic. Yeah.
Oh, it
yeah.
is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, come on. I'm still. Yes. Yeah. That is still. We're still blending fresh juice with some of our ciders, and then things like that to do the hot malts. Yeah. I mean, we're still slinging. Slinging booze, yeah.
Wow.
So, and that's always fun. People love that when it's cold, and I love it when it's cold enough. I miss fall.
Kidding.
I miss that so much about living up north. But yeah, it's it's an interesting
cider
proposition.
in Florida.
That's right.
I've been blowing my mind.
You got to be
Just
ready for,
left and
like I
right.
said, when it's 50 degrees out there, everybody's freezing to death down there. So you got to warm them up.
Yeah, that's true. Let's talk about your barrel program.
Yeah.
So this is another thing I'm trying to wrap my head around. A barrel program in Florida because it gets so darn hot, and we're talking barrels are wood. Let's talk about that, man.
Yeah. So we've always the barrel program's grown quite a bit since we opened. And when we first opened, we had what could almost be called just like an overgrown closet that was temp controlled and had call it a dozen barrels in there for aging. And then when we converted the building next door and turned that into Webb City Cellar, that was the primary focus, was to kind of make a barrel house.
Yeah.
And so it's a big facility, and the entire thing is temp controlled. The whole building is 65 degrees year round, which is very nice to work in. I will say that's where my production facility's at, and I love working in the air conditioning as a brewer in Florida. And so you can go into the cellar, and we have tables lined up all the way down in the cellar, so you can sit amongst the barrels, and there's stacks and stacks, hundreds of barrels in there for the mixed culture beer program and cider and mead, and breweries are growing so fast in Florida, but I can't think of anybody else that's got anything like that in Florida offhand. Anything in the southeast maybe. When I say southeast, I mean Carolinas, Georgia. Carolinas definitely has it. Sorry, Wicked Weed. You guys, the Wicked Weed. Yeah, Wicked Weed was probably the prototype for when we opened ours. But anyway, it's a huge facility and it's great. And in the summertime, you can come in there and it's a nice breezy 65 degrees, and you can hang out in there and chat and drink amongst all the wood. So it's presented a lot of really fun opportunities. I'm always. I recognize that I'm very fortunate to be a cider maker that just happens to be attached to a full-scale brewery. So I have a lot of toys and tools that a lot of my cider making colleagues may not have access to.
Such as
a centrifuge.
Okay.
300 barrels sitting next to me, that I can pull from.
So you are, and this. So folks don't know what a centrifuge is.
Yeah.
Let's just explain. That's like to get the precipitants out.
Yeah, so it's just another filtration method that spins the stuff in a circle and the solids go flying out. And at its core.
But do you feel that like strips much for your cider?
I could get on a tangent here. I think.
Go for it.
My cider,
I have like some feelings about it, but I want to hear you
because I've filtered. I've used plate and frame filters. I've used lenticular filters. I've done membrane filter, all that stuff before, and I think those.
Is this filtered here? What we're
That's centrifuged. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I think I could say that with a lot of filtration methods, I do perceive a difference. Okay, whether that's good or bad, there are times where I can certainly perceive a difference. The centrifuge, I have nothing but my own. I have no evidence to suggest this other than my own experience. I think it does nothing but good for the cider. It's amazing what it does for the cider, and especially if I've done some meads too that are really heavily fruited, and I feel like there's something to be said about how it almost like squeezes the essence out of the if I have berries in there, it seems like it just squeezes the essence out and keeps it in the drink, but just like.
You must
again,
be calibrating it to a certain.
yeah, you
that's
can.
a finesse, right?
You can absolutely.
the right finesse.
You can change turbidity and all that kind of stuff
Yeah.
that you're doing.
You're getting it right.
We actually had to, with the beer side. This is a funny little anecdote. With the beer side, we actually had to reduce the amount of hops we were putting in the beer, because after it went through the centrifuge, it came out and it had extracted that bitterness out of the hops, and so we had to reduce our hop schedule.
Okay.
I think with the ciders, I can put a cider in there. It's not going to make a cider, a bad cider good, but I'll put these ciders in, and what I notice immediately is it seems to age that cider in a really positive way. All of a sudden, it tastes like it's been sitting there aging for another 3 or 6 months longer than it has. And I think it does the same for the beer too. I really would like to do more serious sort of, I don't know, research on kind of if my perception and Chris's perception is wrong, because he and I both are in total agreement about this. But I don't know a lot of other cider makers that are out there running a centrifuge that I can chat with, right? So,
I've heard yet, yeah.
But I think it's a fascinating area that when I find a few extra minutes, we'll do some more looking into. But I could talk a lot about the benefits of the centrifuge. I really, really am fortunate to have it there, and then it just makes these crystal clear, gorgeous ciders at the end of the day.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, I saw breweries bringing in centrifuges back in the 2000s, right? And now they're like not using it because it's like the hazy days, right?
Oh, yeah,
Everybody wants
right.
like a cloudy,
Everybody wants,
beer.
everybody wants the right.
and maybe that will happen for cider too, because I could certainly go that route. But I'm impressed that you're, and also it gives you bottle stability.
Yeah.
Everything's put through the centrifuge.
Yes, everything. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what I don't put through the centrifuge now on the cider side, and I can't really think of anything offhand now. No, it's
wow.
The guys there. We've got it down to a science, and I think it does nothing but good for the ciders. I just want.
You sold me, Brian. I was like a little. Florida. You're making cider, dang good cider, and you're using a centrifuge, and you're doing it really well. So you're kind of like, the baker in the right shop here. You know how to do that.
We had a really interesting discussion with Dave from Two Towns a year or two back about how can we use the centrifuge to replicate keeving in a more repeatable fashion in terms of just like use the centrifuge on to pull out the yeast, run it back in on a percentage of that hasn't been centrifuged, let it rebloom, let it rob all those nutrients, do all that, and put it through that cycle. And how could we? That's something we've been noodling on for a while, and I'll tell you, I haven't gotten around to actually experimenting with it because we're busy doing other stuff. But that's like one of those things on my list, on my notebook, that I'm just like need to investigate. Is trying to do sort of modern solutions to those that have already been figured out, but unfortunately I don't have the time or the tank space to necessarily always hold those for keeves and whatnot. And it's that's how keeves are. It's not always a guaranteed thing. So it's tough when you're filling a tank with 600 gallons of juice to go like, well, I hope this works, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a big commitment, no doubt. Do you put hops in your cider? Let's talk about some of those profiles.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of consider like more modern style.
Sure.
Quick turnaround, and this is the one that we're drinking right now. How long has that been? That's made from. That's
the 2022 juice. So those I'm on a pretty good annual cycle with the heritage fruit. So
fantastic.
Goes in, ferments really cold. I mean, I'm usually fermenting at like 43 degrees, 44 degrees, really cold. And then, so obviously it'll take a long time. And then you get racked a couple times, and then centrifuge. By the time it comes out, it's probably a year old at that point. Give or take, right? Yeah. This went in the bottle probably at like 12 or 13 months from when I got it in juice. So I'm on a good cycle with those heritage with the heritage stuff. In between that time, I'm constantly making what I'll call sort of the mass. I don't know if if anybody's come up with a good term for it. The mass market sort of straight, whatever you want to call that term, where I'm turning juice fast, where I'm bringing in solid juice blends from large blenders that's consistent and I can get all year round, aseptically packed, all those sorts of things that I need from a production standpoint, so I can kind of make that stuff quick and safe and fairly easily. And I'll do, that's where my fruited stuff comes in. This one's got a little raspberry in it. You asked about hops. I've got a really great Pinellas peach that's a little bit of peach. It's not like crazy peach. It's just like there's a little peach in there with the apple. It still tastes like apple cider. then hopped. I used to do Amarillo or Azaka
Amarillo.
or that sort of thing. Quick dry hop, just for a couple days. Honestly, I use that more to enhance the peach than to necessarily strictly get hop, but it's a hopped cider. And then I'll do all sorts of a lot of other fruited things that come and go. Or maybe I'll do stuff, like a New England cider profile that's darker and, with raisins and all that kind of like that sort of New England cider that I feel like that was one of the first ciders I used to make. So we go all over the place with those ciders. And again, those are the ones that I can, I'll turn a tank in 3 or 4 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks and be able to kind of make that stuff, quickly and easily and repeatedly and consistently and all that stuff and that. And so I offer sort of both those experiences at Green Bench. And I like drinking both of them as well. It just, it's just kind of a different, different ciders for different times and places and
different
whatever
palates.
mood I'm in. Yeah.
Different palates. Do you do any ciders where you're using Florida fruits?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And what would those be?
Dragon fruit's great. Passion fruit, I love passion fruit. One of my favorites. But yeah, because I fall into that trap where I really want a blackcurrant cider, which is great, but I've got to I'm bringing in the apples or juice. Right. Now I'm bringing in the fruit. Right. So showcasing what we're doing, what Florida has to offer for fruit, mango and things. We did a sort of a crowdsourced mango cider. This was maybe a year or two back because right about the same time, you drive through St. Petersburg and every other yard has a mango tree that's covered in fruit. And they're huge. Mango trees are huge. They can be. And so we would, we just do you have fruit? Let us know. Bring it in. We'll work out a deal, something like that. And so we do that with mango. I had a buddy of mine who had the giant star fruit tree in his backyard. So one year we did this gigantic, it was
cool.
It was crazy to get out there and try to pick from this giant tree. But what a cool fruit. And when was the last time you saw, 200 pounds of star fruit, right? Never.
I've never seen 200 pounds of star fruit.
See it at the grocery store, 2 at a time for $4 or whatever. And so I love using sort of Florida
What's
fruit.
the profile of a star fruit?
It was interesting. It's a little more delicate than you'd think. I remember it having this there was a lot of floral. It was a little tart because I got sort of mixed. When it was really ripe, it gets, as you might expect, it's much sweeter. And then I'd pick some that were, because there was different ripeness on the tree, I'd pick some that were not as ripe and they're super tart. So you have this cool sweet tart, like the candy sweet tart sort of flavor. And then of course a little citrusy, especially when it's unripe. Very cool fruit that it was one of those ones where we picked it and I'm like, what are we even going to do with this? Because I didn't know what it was going to taste like when it was fermented out. But what the heck? We gave it a shot, and it worked out great. And so we'll do all stuff, stuff like that. Blueberries, strawberries are huge down in Florida as well. Strawberries are great because we're picking strawberries right now at this time of year.
Oh my goodness,
which is
that's
crazy.
hard to imagine.
I know, it's crazy, right?
That's true.
So we're fortunate that we grow a lot of really cool fruit. And then we make mead down there, so we do. Obviously, the meads, we make all sorts of different cool, blends with fruit, but we use a lot of honey, is kind of my point. And so there's
Orange blossom honey?
Yeah, a lot of
classic
a lot of
Florida
really great varieties of honey that I'll use in the cider too, occasionally. Orange blossom or palmetto, which is one of my favorites, or go down the list. There's we're very lucky in honey as well. So, the only thing we don't have in Florida is apples, and that's why apparently I'm a glutton for punishment. So.
Well, you're here making it happen.
That's right.
I mean, you're a mover and shaker, and you have definitely inspired me. I could kind of get in my one lane and have a view on cider makers. And when I met you and you showed me what you're doing at your cidery in Florida, it's really made me dial back my judgment of that. And so I appreciate you doing that for me.
Of course.
It's important because I've talked to people all over the world and you could kind of hear what could be like a place you're thinking,
cider
really?
there? Yeah.
I don't know, really? I mean, on the moon? Okay.
Yeah.
But you're making it happen.
Yeah,
so,
thank you.
Yeah, well done.
I appreciate that.
We went to France together and traveled to, tasting cider, and you were bringing back a whole bunch of product for your staff there at the brewery and cidery for education. I was really impressed by that too, that you were so focused on the educational piece, which we know is critical And places could have turnover, so it's like a big investment to do that. But we know the payoffs of that. Were there specific inspirations from that trip for your cider?
For me, the trip to France was, I mean, obviously, we talked about how important like DuPont cider was for me just getting started. And then you know, I had the holy crap moment as a cider maker when I opened a bottle of Eric Bordelais stuff one day, and I told you that story too. And so going to France and meeting those
I'm trying to remember
folks,
that story of Eric Bordelais.
The story was I went to Michigan one winter to visit my folks for Christmas and just stopped at a bottle shop and grabbed some bottles of stuff because I always did when I was up there, and just opened this bottle of Eric Bordelais Perry, the Granite, and sitting in front of the fire, opened the bottle, had no expectations there, and just like it blew me away. And it was one of those ones where, and I think anybody who does this sort of thing, and it's not just limited to making cider or beer, but anybody who like creates something like that, I feel like has those experiences sometimes where they see an example that just, I mean, it makes you stop and think and just like, how the hell did they do that? And that happened to me. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. That happened to me in my family or my parents' house. And so anyway, that going to France, it was just like it was like the culmination of like a decade's worth of work, you know, to be able to go and see these places that I've seen pictures of or pictures on a bottle. Like, you know, how many times have you seen the DuPont, like the Domaine on the front
house,
of it, right? And then
State House,
and then the van turns down that gravel road, right? I mean, it was just like the sort of, it was like a pilgrimage of sorts.
Yeah.
And so
I walks Etienne DuPont.
Yeah, exactly, right.
The Grand Poupard.
the sweetest guy you've ever met. And for me personally, that was like the sort of culmination of, like I said, a lot of work and dedication, a lot of drinking. So it was, yeah, exactly. And for me, you know, I wanted to go back because, you know, I took all that cider back, and Lord knows customs doesn't need to know how much cider I had packed in my suitcases, but there was a lot. But
well, we all bring an extra suitcase just
that's
for
right.
that.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Part of the protocol.
I was that American flying back with 3 suitcases.
You knew the assignment.
Exactly,
yeah.
And but I wanted to take that back to the staff because it was really, again, it's so important to us that they're equipped with the knowledge they need and the passion to really, you know, sell this stuff to the people that walk in the door. And then it was just a small way of giving back to the staff for kind of making that trip possible for me to go and flaunt, you know, jaunt around France for a week and a half. I said it, I think, to you when like the last day of the trip. Is it trips like that just kind of reinvigorate you as a maker to just sort of remember why you got into it? Because it's running a business is hard, and that just gets. It gets old after a while, and I think everybody's always asked the question, like, why am I, you know, I'm working really hard at this, and that sort of trip is what that does. It makes me excited again, you know, or refreshes that, and just brought me back, like, really eager for the next shot I got at making another cider, you know, like, what's that next one going to be? I'm always chasing a flavor profile that I think is sort of French at its essence, because that was the first, you know, craft cider I had. The first real cider was French cider, so I've cut my teeth on that, and so I'm a little biased there. But it just made me love cider that much more. You know, that's what I came away with.
Yeah, I also, for me, the experience of going there is always an appreciation of how it's enmeshed into like daily life.
Yeah.
On so many levels. So the food is really so well complements each other, going back and forth, and a kind of at ease. I was hoping everybody on the trip kind of just, sometimes we take ourselves a little too seriously, and we get so focused on something that we don't see, just like that, you know, you're actually doing really darn good, what you're doing already in Florida, you know, and to just kind of step back and appreciate and give yourself that, like you said, an opportunity to just enjoy, you know, life. And cider brings us on that journey.
There's very few places on earth where you can enjoy life as much as Normandy, on a sunny September day with a cider in your hand. I mean, it really doesn't get a lot better than that, as far as I've found. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an incredible trip, and
Yeah.
we're like friends forever. So
Yeah, the friendships from the people on that tour. I mean, it was a really unique experience, and I think we all recognized like how awesome that was.
Yeah, continues on the journey. How do we get your products?
I knew you were going to ask me this question. So right now, as of this taping, you've got to come to Green Bench. I will say though that 2024 will start rolling out direct to consumer, so you'll be able to see us online then and be able to order online. But that's still, we're in the middle of kind of rolling that out right now. So I wish I had a better answer for you. You've got to come to Florida or have somebody in Florida who wants to send you some cider, which I think that was intentional to a degree for a while because, again, I think we really wanted to be able to hold and have those conversations with people. And then on the flip side of it, we also just, we made and sold every drop in the tasting room. And so we just, kind of kept growing it slowly until we were ready to start moving those bottles out. Right. Now, CiderCon's always a great chance for me to talk to some of the distributors and things like that. And we can move some of our cider that way. But for just like an individual consumer, that the order online kind of concept is going to be rolling out this year for us. And outside of then, you just have to come down to sunny Florida and spend a weekend in St. Petersburg. I know, that's right.
Such a hardship. And it's, just for folks to know where that is, just for geography. Yeah. It's on the west side of Florida.
Yep, that's West Coast,
in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yep.
Up by, not too far from the Panhandle.
It's further south than that. So it's
not in the Panhandle.
You're correct, yeah.
I look at the map and I think, okay, it's up in that quadrant.
Yep.
I mean, to travel the length of Florida is like 1,000 miles.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah, right.
It's huge state.
Having driven through Florida a lot, it drags on and on sometimes. But so we're on. You're right, Gulf Coast. I mean, we've got some of the world's greatest beaches on our doorstep. I mean, we're just a few minutes from the sand, and it's a really great spot. So flying to Tampa, which is the greatest airport in the world, and then drive across the bridge, and you'll see us. Yeah, simple as that. Perfect. Thank you, Rhea. It's been a pleasure. Always a pleasure talking with you.
This year episode went live on January 31st, 2024, and let me tell you, up in New England, it is cold and chilly outside. So listening to Brian talk about cider in Florida and those warm waters and outstanding beaches and just the whole climate there in general, it just sounds so delicious. And then to have a cider in hand is pretty cool. We'll be following along with Green Bench to see if they start distributing outside of the state. But in the meanwhile, it's always a good time to dream about heading there today. Before I roll out, I want to make a reminder that if you have had any piqued interest in the French Cider Tour, do go to ciderchat.com and that link for Totally Cider Tours to check out the itinerary and then make your reservations today. This is Rhea Windcaller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider. We like ponds. We love orchards and having fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider. We like ponds. We like orchards, having some fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider. Oh yes, we do. We like ponds. Oh yes, we do. We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
There's a reason why we do it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
There is a reason why we drink it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
Ba-da-da-dum. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
Oh, yeah.
We like cider.
Ba-da-da-dum.
We like palms.
Oh, yes, we do.
We like orchards, having some fun.
Yeehaw!